What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Cosmic Culture, the channel where we talk all major movie and television news, theories, breakdowns, and much more. I'm your host, Chris, and yes, this is day 3, still driving across the country, trying to get to Florida from Utah. However, I have another video for you today, and this is a fun one. How will the mutants join the MCU? We did a video like this a few weeks ago now about the Fantastic Four. How could the Fantastic Four enter the MCU? And you guys seemed to really enjoy it. So here are the 3 most likely ways we could see the mutants join the MCU. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our major movie and television news updates. Also, let me know in the comment section down below, which mutant are you the most excited for? Obviously, Wolverine and Professor X are some very big fan favorites, but there are a ton of mutants out there, so let me know who you're most excited to see join the MCU. Now, obviously, the mutants joining the MCU is a huge conversation right now, especially with Professor X being teased and then confirmed later by Patrick Stewart to have an involvement in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. My understanding is that this character is a variant of the Fox Universe Professor X, and it is not a correct or direct correlation to that character, rather a different multiversal Professor X who happens to look and sound exactly like the Professor X we know and love. With that being said, any other mutants, X-Men or not X-Men, whether it's a Wolverine or any type of mutant that are introduced in Multiverse of Madness, are not MCU mutants. There is only one mutant that we know of who will be transferring over to the MCU, and that is Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool will be making a direct transition over to the MCU from the Fox universe. In fact, there are heavy rumors that we will be seeing this exactly happen in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and quite frankly, it is the perfect time to make that happen. However, if we do happen to see Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, Professor X, played by Patrick Stewart, any characters, whether they're variants or they come directly from the Fox universe, they will not be making their way to the MCU. I very much find it unlikely Hugh Jackman is returning to play Wolverine for another 10 years in the MCU. Same with Patrick Stewart, and quite frankly, any other character coming from Fox other than Deadpool. Marvel Studios, the MCU, Disney, will want to do it their own way. So what does that mean? Well, we can expect an entire Marvel introduction to mutants, a Marvel Studios and MCU main timeline introduction to mutants. And of course, the question has to be asked, where have they been this whole time? Infinity War happened, Thanos came and tried to take over the world, and not a single mutant thought to themselves, hey, why don't we try and help? Well, that's because they haven't existed in the MCU up to this point. And although in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness we will see an introduction to mutants, we will get our introduction to MCU's mutants in a very different way. And these, in my opinion, are the 3 best ways to make it happen. This first one, I'll be honest, is 100% a personal theory, but I think it makes a lot of sense and could be a really fun way to explain where the mutants have been up until Thanos and now the future of the MCU. Where exactly have all of these mutants been? Well, I think a good way to introduce the existence of the X gene, which is the gene that is a mutated gene that gives individuals mutant-like powers, could be the blip, Thanos' snap. He snapped away half of the planet Earth, and they just disappeared into nothingness. I think it's very possible, and it would make great sense to me if those who were snapped, some of them experienced altered DNA, and we could call it an X gene. The X gene then later on can either be passed down to their kids or activated through some type of strenuous or stressful situations, which would allow for mutants to start appearing around the planet Earth post-blip. It's possible that some type of agency, almost like S.H.I.E.L.D., but could be anybody, even something new, has been trying to control and contain these strenuous and crazy additions of mutants into the main world, which is why we haven't heard anything about it just yet. That, and we've been focusing on Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Wanda, so the things we've been seeing haven't been the behind-the-scenes mutants post-blip that had a altered DNA segment because of the snapping. But eventually it will become overwhelming, and maybe there is even an individual out there, Professor X, who started a home, a mansion where those who have become mutants can start to reside and try to figure out their powers and how they can do good in the MCU. Maybe they'll even make a team and call them the X-Men. This for me is a extremely natural way to introduce mutants. They haven't been there the whole time in hiding, because that would just be ridiculous. They haven't just magically appeared because, hey, all of a sudden Disney bought Fox, so let's get the mutants in there. No, there has to be a natural transition, something specific that has happened to allow the X gene to start to flourish, but also for it to go through generations very quickly. And since half the world was snapped, there are a lot of people who could have had altered DNA because of this. So in a very small amount of time, the Earth has gone from having no mutants to having a good number of mutants who don't know how to control their powers, who don't know what's happening to them, which would require A, the government to try to control all of this crazy stuff, run scientific experiments, which is something that happens consistently in the comics, or to have the mutants try to protect themselves, create organizations and strongholds where they can all reside. Eventually leading to, Magneto thinking, hey, mutants are powerful and they shouldn't try to hide or pretend like they're normal people. They should run the world. And the classic X-Men big question is, where do the X-Men or mutants fit in the world? So definitely a really cool and natural way to fit them in. Number 2 is one we've been talking a lot about recently, and that is that they could be introduced through Multiverse of Madness. Now, again, I'm not a huge fan of this theory. I don't necessarily want mutants from the X universe, from the Fox universe rather, to walk through a portal and say, hey, we're in the MCU now, what's up? I don't think it's a very clean transition. I definitely would expect more to come from Disney, and there aren't many actors from that Fox universe that I'm dying to see in the MCU. So a portal transition, let's walk through a Doctor Strange portal and into the MCU, would be one of the cheapest ways, in my opinion, that the X-Men would be introduced to the MCU. Now there is another way in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that the mutants could be naturally introduced, and that is through the House of M reverse theory. And that is that we're going to be seeing a reverse House of M storyline, as in where in the comics she says no more mutants and basically wipes all of the mutants out of the multiverse. In the MCU, in this Doctor Strange storyline, it could be the other way around, and somehow Wanda snaps and introduces mutants, altering the DNA of people around her and causing people to experience mutant powers. We've already seen this with Monica Rambeau, who, because of the weird interchange she's had with Wanda and her abilities, has now herself developed abilities. And it could be one simple explosion of Wanda's powers that goes across the Earth, or it could be some type of slow seeping change. Regardless, we could easily see a very natural change from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, from Wanda going berserk and using her already overpowered abilities to change and alter human DNA. If that is the case, I am okay with seeing the mutants enter the MCU through Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but let me be clear, I do not want to see a portal transition. I don't want to see somebody walk through a Doctor Strange portal and say, hey, we're in the MCU now. I think that that's lame, and I'm expecting Disney and Marvel Studios to do better. The third way has to do with the recent release of the Eternals film. Now, I don't think the Eternals specifically will be creating the X-Men or be creating mutants in any way. However, the emergence, which is the birth of a Celestial leaving a planet, destroying that planet, and then becoming a Celestial, could have caused or radiated enough cosmic energy to affect people who have had a dormant X gene inside of their bodies already. Again, in the comics, mutants aren't created. They already exist. They have altered DNA that, if enough stress or certain procedures, scientific experiments, are put on those people, those powers develop. We've seen this in Deadpool, where they put him through all of this stress, near death, and his powers grow from that stimulating experience. Now, that's generally the case for the majority of mutants, and it doesn't require something like a snap or something like a Wanda's Hex to change anything. It could just be that all of these people already have a dormant gene existing within them, and something like the emergence, a literal celestial trying to escape the Earth, has created enough cosmic energy focused in one location that gene could maybe switch on. I don't know exactly how the details behind this would work, but that amount of energy surging from the Earth could radiate enough potential power for the X gene to go from being dormant to being active. So, since the time of the emergence happening in the Eternals film, there is a possibility that the same theory, like what we said with Thanos' blip, where that has caused enough change and stress to the humans who have a DNA structured for that already, to have that altering component where the DNA will then turn from dormant to non-dormant. That is a very cool theory I've also heard, and would be similar to a Thanos blip or a Hulk unsnapping, and would also require the entire world to change at the same time, post Avengers Infinity War, post Avengers Endgame, and could explain where the X-Men have been this whole time, or rather the mutants, where have they been this whole time? And much like with Thanos' blip theory, then they're going to start trying to cover this up. The government has different organizations out, and then maybe a Professor X makes a mansion and makes X-Men, and lots of really fun theories like that. Regardless, one thing for certain for me needs to happen. It needs to be natural, and it can't be, hey, we just magically found them. And I also don't want to hear that they've been hiding in the background the whole time, because I feel like that would be rather lame as well. Deadpool's sure to make a few jokes about it because 1, he breaks the fourth wall, and 2, he's just a really funny character who will take any opportunity to make a joke at that fourth wall. But regardless, I'm excited to see how the X-Men do finally enter the MCU. Let me know which of these theories was your favorite in the comment section down below. I personally prefer either the emergence or the blip causing the already altered DNA to trigger and then to start revealing mutants, but also the Wanda House of M reverse theory is a lot of fun as well. Let me know in the comment section which was your favorite, or if you have any other ideas of how the mutants might be introduced to the MCU. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our daily updates happening right here on Cosmic Culture.